I want to introduce you to to our guest speaker today, my friend Christo Chaney from the Jewish Synagogue Congregation Shahareth, Israel, here in Lubbock, where he currently serves as a lay leader and often emphasizes that he is not a rabbi. But does lead religious prayer and services on occasion, and I encourage you to, if there's an opportunity to experience a Jewish synagogue service, when Christo does it. I don't know, I haven't been to too many others, but but it's a real special treat. So please join me in welcoming back Christo. His message today is about abortion in Judaism when it is permitted and even required.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me back. You'll know by now it's been my custom to ask the UUs to pick what the subject will be, and I was not really thrilled with this one.
Sorry. Do we need the TVs?
Yeah, turn on, please. But that's what I get for allowing UUs to select the topic for me, and I was like, it had to be this one. Okay. So I'm going to go through most of this kind of quickly, but because I'm going through it kind of quickly, if you want the keynote slides, I can make them as a PDF for you and send them to you to look through. The three main texts, Jewish texts that I'll be going through, are the earliest as well as the most authoritative. First is the Tanakh, which all of you probably know it as the Old Testament. It's very much similar to a Christian Old Testament, but the order of the books are very different, and Jews understand it very differently because we Jews are still reading it in the same language it was first written in, and we really don't like using translations unless we must. The other text that is right after the Jewish Bible is called the Mishnah, and it was compiled in about the year 200 CE, and it basically discusses every conceivable Jewish subject at that time that was going on. The third part is called the Gemara. It's a massive collection of manuscripts in mostly Aramaic that was discussed over about 300 years. And it was finally finished in about 550 CE. When I talk about the Talmud, what I'm talking about is the Mishnah and the Gemara both combined together. All 2,711 humongous sheets of it. And I think I showed a picture of my complete Talmud. It's around 30 volumes. That's the smallest one that's ever been printed. The others are around 40 plus volumes or more. So those are the three Jewish texts that I will quickly go through with the references for you to know about. But let's start with the Bible, because so many people who are against abortion no matter what they call themselves Bible only. The Bible is their only authority. Well, according to their own Bible, no matter what translation they're using, life doesn't begin at conception. And yeah, remember those old Baptist hymnals? Those are the actual musical notes. For the Bible tells me so. That's from their hymnal. The first one is in Genesis chapter 2. Whoops, go back. Calm down, Christo. The eternal God formed the man from the dust of the earth. He blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and then man became a living being. From the earliest text of both the Jewish and the Christian Bibles, the scriptures themselves are insistent that life begins at first breath. Later on in Exodus 21, it says, one who fatally strikes another person is to be put to death. And in the Holiness Code, this is the part that I normally read during the high holidays in my synagogue, in Hebrew, not English. Do not go around spreading lies about your people, and do not stand idle while your fellow bleeds. Near the end of the Torah, Moses is bringing God's last few messages to Israel before they come into their promised land and start to inhabit it. And God says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Notice how God is telling Israel, choose life if you and your offspring would live. The reason that I always cite the Mishnah and Talmud and other texts is because Judaism is not Bible-based only. It can't be. If Judaism was Bible-based only, Judaism would not have survived into the modern world today. Almost every page of the entire Talmud, the sages cite somewhere in the Bible to back up their claims for why things need to be done a certain way. In Leviticus 18, the verse is, by the pursuit of which a person shall live. And when the sages in the Talmud are citing this verse, they elaborated 3 other words. Velo sheyumut bahem, that they shall live and not die by them. Judaism has always emphasized, yeah, God wants you to live by the commandments, but God does not want you to die by them. And by the way, even though I'm quoting Jewish sources, these don't necessarily apply to Unitarian Universalists. These are sources for how Jews are to live, not necessarily someone who is not Jewish. But hopefully, all of y'all can derive some benefit and helpful guidance from my sacred text as well as others. But what I've shown you, there was this long discussion about a dangerous heretic that could go around healing people of various diseases and illnesses and injuries. So the sages were wondering, can we allow a heretic that is dismantling our very way of life to save human lives? And I'll leave that up there, but they basically, the Koran translation gives a little better explanation. He shall live by them. This teaches that one should live by God's commandments and not that he should die by them. This verse serves as a source for the Jewish legal decision that one may, and I say actually you should, violate a biblical prohibition in order to save a human life. But although Judaism has never really liked capital punishment or executing criminals to death, they actually tried to avoid it whenever they could. However, there were always some instances where they couldn't avoid it, even though they really wanted to. In the Mishnah, there was a brief discussion on what do they do about a woman who's pregnant, who is suffering, who has been decreed to be executed. So if a woman is about to be executed, they do not wait for her until she gives birth. But if she had already begun the process of giving birth, they wait until the fetus is born before she is executed. And you can find that in Arachin 1:4. This translation is by Dr. Joshua Kolb. He translated the whole Mishnah. He does it better than I ever could. This part of the Mishnah, I don't share this with most people, but I will share it with y'all, and I'm kind of very nervous now that we're live broadcast. It's from Ochalo 7:6. Suppose that a woman is going to die in childbirth. What do we do? Do they terminate the pregnancy to save the pregnant woman's life, or do they let her die and let the fetus survive? Here's the decision that they made. The woman who is having too much trouble giving birth, meaning if this is going to kill her, if this is going to end her life, look at what it says. And this text is from 200 CE, not 2022. They cut up the fetus inside of her and take it out in pieces, because her life comes before its life. If most of the fetus has emerged already, they will not harm it, because we don't exchange one life for another. Judaism does not allow abortion out of convenience, but if abortion is needed, especially to save a human life, it is not only permitted, it is absolutely required to save the life. What would we rather have? A woman surviving a difficult pregnancy so that she can hopefully give birth to many more children later on, or is it just worth it for a meshugana cause to let her die anyway and not have more children later? It seems kind of self-destructive, especially. I'm not going to say his name here, never mind. I don't have the spoons for him anymore. I ticked him off really bad a couple months ago, so he may not talk to me again. But later on, I just finished recently reading Volume Yavamot, and that's the most difficult volume of the Talmud to go through. I don't recommend most people read it, but in this part, they have a scenario. What if there's a pregnant non-Jew that wants to convert to Judaism? Does her offspring after they're born require an immersion, tevilah, which is now called a mikveh, or not? And they decided that a pregnant woman who has not given birth, when she finishes her conversion process to Judaism, any future children, even though she's already pregnant, once they're born, they're automatically Jewish to begin with. These are all Jewish texts that basically is a Jewish take on it, that life does not begin at conception. A fetus is a potential life. It has the potential to be life, but it is not a life yet. And at the very end of it, you see Professor Neusner translated as a matter of the law of the Torah. So everything, they're going back to what most Christians call the Old Testament for a source as to why the early rabbis and Jews today are making certain decisions. We always go back to the Hebrew Bible sooner or later. We had these in the order of service, but this was Rabbi Mara Nathan. The woman is never the villain when difficult choices need to be made. And I think she was a rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York City, where I've been. I don't use that, but any of you that have a uterus and can get pregnant, there's your logo for someone that tries to tell you what to do with your medical choices. Because as a Jew, even though I don't support abortion out of convenience, and you can be pissed if you want, you can come talk to me afterwards, I won't be offended, I will never, ever in my life tell any of you what to do with your bodies. If an abortion is best for you, you go do that. Because I do not have the right to tell you what to do. Judaism, my religion, guides me. It guides my life. It does not dictate yours, and I do not want it to. For all of these Jewish sources that I have shown, that I've quoted to you, if you don't have the money to buy expensive volumes, like Professor Neusner's 22 volumes, it's hard to get, or the 42-volume Corn edition, which is $2,000, you can read all of this online for free, and most of it's in English on Sefaria.org. And if you don't know it in the source language, well, almost all of it has an English translation somewhere. And if something does not have an English translation yet, there are volunteers on Sefaria helping to make more translations available, and you are listening to one of the volunteers helping Sefaria with more translations. So now that I've covered Jewish sources, let's look at some secular sources that apply to all of us, myself included. Within the Bill of Rights of our Constitution, the very First Amendment tells us in no uncertain terms that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of any religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise of it. Notice the end of the First Amendment, that not only do you have the right to assemble peaceably, you also have the right to petition this government for a redress of your grievances. I hope you're doing that. Because if you're not, you really need to. It was based off of our Declaration of Independence, which was signed Thursday, July 4th, 1776. And it's too bad that it says all men were created equal. They didn't include women yet, but thankfully the later amendments of the Constitution did. And even though they said endowed by their Creator, you can interpret that however you want. Whether you want to interpret that as the God that I preach to 3 times a day, or some other creative force, however you want to understand that, you have certain inalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the active pursuit of your happiness. To be as clear as possible, everyone, that is the law of this land, the U.S. Constitution. Not my Tanakh, not my Mishnah, not either Talmud. No religious text is the law of this land. It must never be. Because the very moment that any religion has more say than another, all freedom is lost immediately. You had freedom of reproductive rights when Roe was decided on January 22nd, 1973. And as I was preparing these very slides, I heard the news of Dobbs v. Jackson on June 24th, I literally cried my eyes out. Because that very day, every single one of you that are able to get pregnant, you lost your religious freedom that very day. And all of us know here, living here in Texas, they were the fastest to even ban abortion, while Roe was still technically the law of the land. This is how fast your rights can be taken away. Mine too, just so that y'all know. And I kind of apologize for the graphic, but a certain religious figure holding a gun to the back of the Statue of Liberty. Notice she's pregnant against her will and her torch is out. I could not get the message across any clearer than that. But that is exactly what has happened with Dobbs v. Jackson. For the Chalice Lighting words, I want to emphasize this once more. Freedom not only of, but as well as freedom from religion. Because as a Reformed Jewish American, my freedom of religion must also, and it always will, include your Unitarian Universalist freedom to abstain from religion if you want. No religious text, including my own Jewish text, must ever become American law. Only our democracy, and never anyone's theocracy, especially my own. I'm going to paraphrase Hillel. I've used this last time. Im ein anachnu li, ma mi anachnu. If we are not for ourselves, then who will be for us? When we're only for ourselves, what then are we? If not now, when? So I am sorry to go through that so quickly for time constraints, but all these slides are available to each of you if you want them in PDF. But I always try to make a point of, towards the end, to invite some questions from your community if you have any. Josh, do we have time for them, or I can stay after for questions?
I think we could do a little bit of time.
Yeah, but my email is up here. If you want the PDF slides, you can send me an email and I will send them to you. Or someone can come up to the side mic if that helps with time also.
Hello, hello.
Here, question. Here, out of that.
First of all, thank you for the coffee and the puddings you brought over to St. Christopher's next door this morning. They were greatly appreciated over there, and I hope to see some of you out in the parking lot as well. I would just like to offer one observation, because I have also been very much upset about this new doctrine about life beginning at conception. That is not a traditional Christian belief. We are all familiar with the phrase, the quick and the dead, meaning the living, the quick, and the dead. And I can remember my grandmother and my mother awaiting quickening when the baby first moved in the womb. And that was a Christian belief, that that's when life began for that fetus. And until quickening, it was a non-person. And after quickening, then even if the mother's life is endangered, then save the mother for those future children, as well as you have just said. But for these people to stand up and quote the Bible that life begins at conception, they're misquoting.
Because there's the verses that begin from, and you can use their Bible to prove them wrong. Even their Baptist hymnal for, put the notes wrong. I was that good. There's no other questions. Are you serious?
You were that good.
I'm just curious as to whether that ACLU represented synagogue. I think it was in Florida.
They did.
Okay, is that an active case?
The last I
Do you
checked,
know?
it is an active case, and because this Jewish synagogue started this, other non-Jewish congregations are joining in as well, citing their own separate religious text to help the Jewish synagogue. And
So other denominations,
other religions,
Other
there have been
religions.
some mosques, because
Yeah.
Islam does not Islam, I think, allows abortion up to a certain point. I think it's like, I don't remember how many weeks in the pregnancy it is. But even after abortion is no longer allowed in Islam, the Sharia law does require in some cases, and again, it's to save the pregnant woman's life. So to ban abortion no matter what violates religious freedom. And y'all heard about that 10-year-old girl?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where's her religious freedom? You really think she can't even ride in a front seat of a car? She can't vote. She can't have a job. But you're going to demand her to raise a child when she's a child herself? Why not go after her rapist?
Well, I'm going to quote our distinguished board director, or head president of our board, that rather than it being reproductive justice for women, it's reproductive rights for rapists. And I know that sounds harsh, but when you really stop and look at it, that's what that's about. They have rights. 10-year-old pregnant girls do not. So, yeah.
Isn't it so heartbreaking?
Despicable.
Isn't it so heartbreaking that all the bodies in the city of Lubbock Cemetery and Rest Haven Memorial Gardens, they have more rights than that 10-year-old child does, and people who can get pregnant? No one can force me to donate my organs and my blood when I die. I'm going to do it. I'm a donor, but no one can force me to. So how is that fair to give me that choice? Not force me to donate my organs to save how many lives? 10 or 11 lives with my body if something happens to me? But okay, so yeah, it's a little bit past noon. So I'm gonna leave my email up here. Be in touch whenever you want. And for anyone who wants the slides, they're already made in PDF format. I'll send them to you without hesitation if you want them. Josh, please close us out, please.
Thank you very much, Christo. I appreciate it. I definitely came out learning something from this as well. I've never had that much in depth with scriptures I was raised with, and with the scriptural tradition and stuff like that. So, thank you very much. Our closing words are by Emma Goldman. True emancipation begins neither at the polls nor in the courts. It begins with a woman's soul. Please rise in body and spirit, and would somebody start carry the flame?
Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
We need to start a choir. Go in peace. Go in